The night began with promise, a fragile, glowing promise wrapped in the soft candlelight of Il Giardino, where love stories had begun, ended, and been reborn 1,000 times before. The restaurant was alive with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the faint melody of a violin drifting through the warm air. At a corner table draped in white linen, Katie Logan sat opposite Bill Spencer, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for his. There was something electric in the air between them, a sense of renewal, of something broken being gently pieced back together after years of mistakes, absences, and forgiveness that never seemed to hold for long. Bill looked at her with a kind of quiet awe. For a man who had built empires and burned them down with equal ease, it was strange how fragile he felt now, how much the curve of her smile could make or unmake him. This dinner was meant to be a celebration of second chances. They had survived the storms, the betrayals, the long nights apart when pride had kept them from reaching for each other. And now, after months of careful rebuilding, it seemed that fate had finally softened its grip. Katie was radiant tonight, her laughter free of the shadows that used to haunt her eyes. When the waiter poured the wine, she hesitated, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. Bill noticed the gesture immediately. "Everything all right?" he asked, his tone soft but laced with concern. Katie hesitated, then smiled nervously. "Actually," she said, "I was waiting for the right moment." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a printout from her doctor. Bill frowned, puzzled, then unfolded it. His eyes scanned the words, and for a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Positive. His head snapped up, disbelief flashing across his face before it melted into pure, unfiltered joy. "You mean," he started, voice thick. Katie nodded, tears brimming. "We're going to have a baby." For a man like Bill Spencer, joy was usually measured in power, profit, or control. But in that instant, all of it fell away. He stood, took her face in his hands, and kissed her with a kind of reverence that surprised even him. The restaurant blurred into background noise. The applause, the smiles from nearby tables, the flicker of candlelight all became distant echoes to the miracle between them. For years, they had both believed their time for miracles had passed. Yet here it was, beating faintly within her, a second chance not just at family, but at redemption. Katie's tears came freely. "I didn't think this could happen," she whispered. Bill shook his head, his grin boyish, almost disbelieving. "It's fate, Katie. It's life giving us one more shot." He raised his glass, toasting the future, his voice trembling as he said, "To us. To our child." But fate, cruel and meticulous, has a way of writing its own endings. Their laughter had barely faded when Katie's phone buzzed against the table. She frowned, noticing the caller ID, her doctor's office. "It's probably just routine," she said, excusing herself as she answered. Bill watched her walk toward the patio, the soft flow of her dress catching the light. He could still feel the warmth of her hand in his, still hear her words echoing like a heartbeat. He was so lost in the dream of it all that he didn't notice the way her expression changed as she listened to the voice on the other end of the line, the way her face drained of color, her body stiffened, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and horror. "Are you sure?" she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking. "That can't be right, there must be some mistake." She listened again, her hand gripping the edge of the table for balance. "Yes, I understand." She finally managed, her tone hollow. When she hung up, the world around her seemed to spin. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, all became a distant roar in her ears. She turned toward the table, her steps unsteady, her face pale. Bill rose immediately, concern etching his features. "Katie? What is it?" She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Her vision blurred as she met his eyes, those blue eyes so full of love and anticipation, and felt the weight of the truth crush her chest. "There's been a mistake," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The clinic called. They double-checked the results. The baby," her voice broke completely. Bill took her hands, his brow furrowing. What do you mean, a mistake? Her lips trembled. It's not yours, Bill. The silence that followed was absolute. It felt as though the air itself had vanished from the room. For a long moment he didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. His mind refused to process the words, to connect the sound of her voice with the meaning behind them. That's not funny, he said finally, forcing a strained laugh. But the tears in her eyes told him everything. No, he said, his voice dropping, deadly calm now. Tell me you're wrong. Katie's tears fell harder. I wish I were. He stepped back, the chair behind him scraping the floor with a violent screech. Who? The question came out as a growl, sharp and dangerous. Katie's body trembled. She wanted to lie, to protect herself, to protect him, but the truth pressed against her ribs like a confession begging to escape. It was Deacon. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Bill's expression changed, freezing into something dark and unreadable. He turned slowly, and there, just a few feet away, stood Deacon Sharp, holding a tray of wine glasses, his face draining of color as their eyes met. The realization hit all three of them at once, and in that instant, Illinois Giardino became a stage for tragedy. The tray slipped from Deacon's hand, shattering across the floor. Conversation stopped. Every sound in the restaurant faded into a hush as Bill Spencer's fury filled the room. You, he hissed, his voice trembling with restrained violence. Deacon's lips parted, but no words came. He had seen that look in Bill's eyes before, the look of a man 1 second away from destroying everything in his path. Katie reached for Bill's arm, desperate to stop what was coming. Please don't. Don't what? Bill roared, his voice echoing across the restaurant. Don't react to the fact that my wife, is carrying his child. His gaze burned into Deacon, who stood frozen in shock and guilt. Tell me, Sharp, Bill spat. How long have you been serving her dinner when I wasn't around? The words sliced through Katie like knives. It wasn't like that, she cried. It was one night. I was drunk alone. I didn't even remember until now. But her explanation only deepened the wound. Bill's laughter was sharp, cruel, a sound born of disbelief and agony. You didn't remember, he repeated. You forgot sleeping with him, and now you're telling me you're carrying his child? Every head in the restaurant turned. Deacon tried to speak, his voice shaking. Bill, it wasn't she didn't. Shut up, Bill snapped, his tone venomous. Don't say her name. Don't even look at her. His chest heaved, his entire body trembling with rage. For a moment, Katie thought he might strike Deacon, but instead, he did something worse. He looked at her with eyes colder than she had ever seen. You said you wanted a second chance, he said quietly. You swore we could start over. And the first thing you give me is this. Katie's voice broke. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted. You wanted him, Bill interrupted, his tone hollow. Even if you didn't remember it, some part of you did. He turned away, his jaw clenched so tightly, it looked painful. Congratulations, Katie. You and Deacon can toast your new beginning. With that, he threw a wad of cash onto the table and walked out, his footsteps echoing like gunshots through the stunned silence. Katie stood frozen, her tears blurring everything. Deacon took a hesitant step toward her, guilt etched across his face. Katie, he whispered, I'm so sorry. But she recoiled as though struck. Don't. Please. Just don't. The following days unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. The story spread through Los Angeles faster than any wildfire. The tabloids devoured it. Bill Spencer's humiliation, Katie Logan's scandal, Deacon Sharp's involvement. Forrester Creations publicists scrambled to contain the damage, but gossip travels faster than truth. Brooke, torn between her loyalty to her sister and her complicated history with both men, tried to mediate, but Bill refused to take her calls. Tell your sister she got what she wanted, he told her coldly. Freedom. Katie retreated from the public eye, her house dark and silent. The pregnancy became both her punishment and her penance. Every doctor's visit, every heartbeat she heard reminded her not only of what she had lost but also of what was to come, a child born of guilt and confusion. She loved the baby already, but the shadow of its conception haunted her. Nights were the worst. She would sit by the window, watching the city lights blur, whispering apologies into the darkness that no one could hear. Deacon tried to reach out, but she avoided him. His remorse was genuine, but his presence was unbearable. Every time she saw him, she saw Bill's face, his shattered trust, his rage. Deacon knew there was no forgiveness to be found here. Not from her, not from Bill, not even from himself. Bill, meanwhile, retreated into isolation. His office at Spencer Publications became a fortress. He stopped attending meetings, stopped answering calls. The man who once ruled with unshakable confidence now stared blankly at the skyline, the glass walls of his empire reflecting his own emptiness back at him. He drank too much, slept too little, replayed the night over and over until it hollowed him out completely. The memory of Katie's trembling confession, the way she said, "It's not yours," was a wound that refused to close. Weeks turned into months. Katie's pregnancy progressed quietly, and though she avoided the spotlight, the whispers never stopped. When she finally gave birth, a daughter, small and fragile, with her mother's eyes, the hospital was eerily silent. Brooke was there, holding her sister's hand, but the empty chair beside the bed spoke louder than any words. Bill didn't come. Deacon did, standing awkwardly at the door, his hands shaking. Katie looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "She deserves better than the way she was conceived. Promise me you'll be the man she can be proud of." He nodded, his voice breaking. "I will." Bill didn't see the baby until weeks later. He told himself he didn't care, that the betrayal was too deep, but when he caught sight of Katie on the sidewalk one morning, holding the infant wrapped in a pink blanket, something inside him cracked. The child's cry pierced the air, and for a moment, his heart remembered what it was to love without condition. But the pain returned just as quickly, reminding him that love had betrayed him too many times to trust it again. Katie looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. There was no hatred in hers, only sorrow. She didn't call out to him, and he didn't move toward her. The world between them was too wide now, carved by choices neither could undo. As months passed, life resumed its cruel rhythm. Katie raised her daughter quietly, finding strength in motherhood. Bill buried himself in work, becoming colder, harder, untouchable. Deacon tried to rebuild his life, haunted by what his weakness had cost. But sometimes, when the night was still and the city lights flickered against the sea, Bill would find himself at Il Giardino, sitting alone at that same corner table, a glass of bourbon untouched before him. He would stare at the door, as if expecting her to walk in again, smiling, hopeful, forgiven. But the door stayed closed, and the candles burned low, and he would whisper to the empty chair across from him, "I could have loved you forever, if only you had remembered me instead of him." And in that silence, beneath the hum of the city that never slept, the truth lingered: love, once broken, never heals the same. It survives, perhaps, in fragments and echoes, but it never forgets the night it died. The morning of Hope's wedding dawned like a dream painted in gold. The Forrester estate glittered with soft white roses, crystal chandeliers, and the low hum of whispered blessings. Every inch of the mansion seemed to glow with expectation. After all the heartbreak, after the years of chasing and losing, Hope Logan was finally marrying Liam Spencer. It was supposed to be perfect, a long-awaited promise sealed under sunlight and silk. Yet perfection has a way of disguising itself as tragedy before the fall. Beneath the laughter, beneath the perfume and champagne, there was a pulse of unease, subtle, almost imperceptible, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Upstairs, in her bridal suite, Hope stood before the mirror. The gown flowed around her like a whisper, white lace kissed with the faintest shimmer of silver. Her hair fell in loose waves, her smile delicate, almost practiced. Brooke adjusted the veil, her eyes glistening with pride and something else, an emotion she could not name. "You look like a dream," she whispered. Hope smiled faintly. "That's all it's ever been, hasn't it? A dream." Brooke's brow furrowed at the odd tone in her daughter's voice, but before she could ask, there was a knock at the door. Thomas Forrester stepped inside, his expression calm but too deliberate, the kind of calm that precedes chaos. His eyes flicked to Hope, then to Brooke. "I need a word with the bride," he said evenly. Brooke hesitated, sensing the tension, but Hope nodded. "It's all right, Mom. I'll be fine." Brooke gave her a quick kiss on the cheek and slipped out, unaware that she was leaving behind a storm waiting to break. The air in the room shifted the moment the door clicked shut. Hope turned to face Thomas, her voice soft but wary. "What are you doing here?" "You shouldn't be," he interrupted her, his tone low and cutting. "You shouldn't be lying." Hope froze. "Excuse me?" Thomas reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen once, and the room filled with sound, the unmistakable crackle of a recorded conversation. Hope's own voice emerged, faint but clear. "After the ceremony, Carter will meet me at the airport. By midnight, we'll be gone, no explanations, no goodbyes. I can't live like this anymore, pretending to love Liam when my heart is somewhere else." Hope's knees went weak. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. Thomas's gaze was steady, almost sympathetic, but there was steel beneath it. "Does it matter? You said it. You planned it." She shook her head, panic rising like bile. "That's not what it sounds like. It was just talk." I was confused, but Thomas wasn't listening. He had already turned off the recording, sliding the phone into his pocket with quiet precision. "Confusion doesn't sound like a plan, Hope. It sounds like betrayal." Unbeknownst to both of them, just outside the half-open door, Liam Spencer stood frozen. He had come to surprise Hope before the ceremony, to tell her how much she meant to him before she walked down the aisle. But now, each word from that recording hit him like a physical blow. The air left his lungs. The room seemed to tilt beneath him. For a moment, he couldn't even process what he was hearing. His mind replayed the words over and over, pretending to love Liam, my heart is somewhere else. Hope reached for Thomas, desperation flashing in her eyes. "Please don't tell him." I was going to, but the door creaked open before she could finish. Liam stepped inside, his face pale, eyes hollow. The look in them was not anger. Not yet, but something far worse. Disbelief. Hope's breath caught. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not what you think." He laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "Oh, because what I think is that my fiancé was planning to leave me for another man tonight." He turned to Thomas, his jaw tight. "You recorded her?" Thomas hesitated. "I didn't want to. Don't pretend you're the hero here," Liam snapped. "You could have come to me before this morning. You waited until the wedding." "Why?" Thomas's silence was answer enough. His motives were tangled, half vengeance, half warped protection. He had loved Hope once, maybe still did, and exposing her now was both justice and punishment. But before he could answer, another voice filled the doorway. "Hope." Carter Walton stood there, his expression stricken. He had heard enough from the hallway to understand. His presence alone confirmed what Liam already knew. The truth had stepped into the light, and there was no turning back. Hope's world fractured in an instant. "Carter," she breathed, as if saying his name might somehow make it less real. He looked at her with a mixture of guilt and sorrow. "I told you not to go through with it," he said softly. "You said you wanted freedom, that you were suffocating." Liam turned on him, rage flaring now like wildfire. "Freedom? You call this freedom? Sneaking around behind my back, planning an escape, while I was planning our life." Hope reached for him, tears streaking down her face. "Liam, please, don't," he snapped, stepping back. "Don't touch me." The words hit her like a slap. She stumbled, her voice breaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I was going to tell you after the wedding when what?" Liam's voice cracked under the weight of betrayal. "When you were already gone. When you and Carter were on some beach pretending this never happened." He shook his head, tears burning behind his eyes. "I thought you were different, Hope. I thought you were the one person who wouldn't lie to me." Thomas looked away, guilt flickering across his face. Brooke entered the room then, drawn by the sound of raised voices. She stopped dead at the sight, Liam trembling, Hope sobbing, Carter silent in shame. "What's going on?" she demanded. No one answered at first. Then Thomas spoke, his voice low. "You should ask your daughter." Brooke's gaze shifted to Hope, confusion hardening into dread. Hope. Hope couldn't speak. Her lips moved, but no words came. It was Liam who broke the silence, his voice hollow. "Your daughter wasn't planning a wedding, Brooke. She was planning an escape, with Carter Walton." Brooke's eyes widened, her hand flying to her chest. "No," Thomas nodded grimly. "There's a recording." She said it herself. Brooke turned to Hope, her voice trembling. "Tell me it isn't true." Hope's silence was her answer. For a long, unbearable moment, no one moved. Then Brooke sank into a chair, her face pale. "Oh, Hope," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You've become me." That sentence cut through the air like a knife. Hope looked up, horrified. "Mom, no." But Brooke shook her head, tears welling. "All my life, I tried to protect you from my mistakes, from the way I hurt people, from the way I destroyed love, because I couldn't stop chasing what I thought I needed. And now you've done the same thing." Her voice rose, trembling with anguish. "You had a man who loved you, who would have done anything for you, and you threw it away for what? A fantasy? A moment of weakness?" Hope's sobs came harder now. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean to fall for Carter. It just happened. I felt trapped, invisible, like I was living someone else's life. With him, I felt seen." Liam turned away, his shoulders shaking. "You think that makes it better?" Carter stepped forward, his voice low. "I'll take responsibility. This isn't just her fault." But Liam rounded on him, fury blazing through the grief. "You were supposed to be my friend, Carter. You stood beside me through everything, and this is what you do? You betray me with her?" Carter dropped his gaze, shame written across every line of his face. "I never meant to hurt you." "Then why did you?" Liam's voice cracked. "Why couldn't you stay away?" No one had an answer. The room felt suffocating, thick with pain and accusation. Brooke tried to reach for her daughter, but Hope pulled away, her eyes wild with guilt. "Stop looking at me like I'm you," she whispered. "I'm not you." Brooke flinched. "Then prove it," she said softly. "Fix this before it's too late." But it already was. The ceremony was cancelled. Guests whispered outside, unaware of the full truth, but sensing disaster. Hope locked herself in her room, her wedding gown discarded on the floor like the carcass of a dream. Brooke sat outside the door, silent, her own memories of past betrayals resurfacing like ghosts. She had once stood where Hope was now, pleading for forgiveness that never came. Liam left the mansion without a word. He drove until the city lights blurred into darkness, until the ache inside him was louder than the world outside. He loved Hope, perhaps he always would, but love wasn't enough anymore. It had become a battlefield, and he was too tired to keep fighting for someone who had already surrendered. Carter resigned from Forrester Creations the next day. He couldn't face the whispers, the stares, or the knowledge that he had destroyed something pure. He left town quietly, leaving only a note for Hope. "I wanted to save you from your cage, but I never meant to become the bars." As for Hope, she tried to return to normalcy, but normal no longer existed. The scandal haunted her everywhere she went, reporters, gossip, pitying glances. Brooke tried to shield her, but every attempt only deepened the rift between them. Hope began to see her mother not as an enemy, but as a mirror, proof that patterns repeat, that no one truly escapes the curse of desire. Weeks turned into months. Liam didn't return her calls. Thomas stayed away, consumed by his own guilt. Carter's absence left a void she couldn't fill. Hope worked in silence at Forrester, designing dresses that no longer spoke of love or beauty, but of consequence, of what happens when truth shatters the illusions we cling to. One evening, she stood alone in the design room, the sunset bleeding through the windows. On the mannequin before her hung her unworn wedding gown. She touched the fabric lightly, her fingers tracing the seams. It had been meant for a future that would never come. She whispered to the empty room, "Maybe I was always meant to ruin what I love." Brooke entered quietly behind her. "No," she said softly. "You were meant to learn from it." Hope turned, tears in her eyes. "And you? Did you?" Brooke smiled sadly. Eventually, she placed a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Pain doesn't define us, Hope. What we do after it does." For the first time, Hope didn't pull away. She nodded slowly, her eyes drifting back to the gown. The light shifted, turning the white fabric to gold, then to shadow. Somewhere in that fading light, she felt the faint stirrings of redemption. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. Outside, the evening wind carried the sound of the ocean against the cliffs. Life, relentless as ever, went on. But in that quiet room, surrounded by silk and memory, Hope Logan understood the truth her mother had learned long ago. Love, when built on deception, always ends in ruin, but sometimes ruin is the only way the heart learns how to begin again.